But first, whatever else it might mean, Donald Trump's second coming is a massive defeat for identity politics, climate alarmism, uncontrolled migration and big government, at least in America, but with lessons and consequences for the wider world. As he kept telling voters during the campaign, I'm for you, Kamala is for they, them. And that play on pronoun politics was no accident. As he kept saying during the campaign, the way to get energy prices down is to drill, baby, drill. So no pretense from him that the so-called green transition means more jobs and cheaper electricity. It doesn't, and we know that here only too well. He kept saying in the campaign that illegal migration, and he stressed illegal migration, cuts American wages, is stealing American jobs and lowering the standard of living for American citizens. So none of this nonsense that low-skilled workers flooding across the border was somehow good for the economy. This fact says it all. Voters at the poorer end of the spectrum supported Trump over the traditional party of the worker, the Democrats. What we're seeing here is the realignment of the left as the home of the elites and the right as the home of low to middle income battlers. And that realignment is playing out across the Western world, including here in Australia. Trump promised repeatedly that under him taxes would be lower company taxes to drive the economy, plus no taxes on tips or taxes on overtime to make it easier for working people to get ahead. And then there's Elon Musk, one of the world's most innovative businessmen, recruited by Trump for a war on waste and inefficiencies inside government. Well, God help the public service, that's all I can say. Most Australians, except those watching Sky News or reading the News Corp papers, well, they've been conditioned to think of Trump as a right-wing nutjob. But as former Canadian Prime Minister Stephen Harper once said to me, look, Peter, I can often fault what he says, but I can rarely fault what he does. That's where I sit, because actually getting things done, that's the real challenge in modern politics. By promising that Trump will fix it, his campaign team spoke to the millions of Americans who want to see their leaders address the problems that matter to them, to get stuff done, to fix what needs fixing rather than strike a pose and achieve little. If you judge Trump's first term based on what he got done, well, there's every reason to think he'll be better second time around. Most politicians are. In his first term, he said he'd pull out of Paris, and he did. He said he'd cut taxes and regulations, and he did. He said he'd boost defence, and he did. He said there'd be no more wars under his administration, and there were not. He said he'd move the embassy to Jerusalem, back Israel, and he did. He said he'd build a wall, and he made a good start despite obstruction from the Congress. And as voters clearly remembered when they voted yesterday, when he was president, there were higher wages, greater wealth and record employment. Now, sure, he was a sore loser in 2020, but that never justified the legal witch hunt against him from the Democrats, who never got over his 2016 victory. In their Get Trump mania, his opponents trashed due process and they manipulated the law, every bit as much as they claimed he disrespected democracy. Truly, this is a comeback for the ages, a tribute to a man's courage and resilience, to his sense of what really moves the American people, and indeed to the ideological blinkers of his opponents. I have to say, as many newly elected governments have found, things can still turn pretty sour for you if the performance fails to match the promises. Perhaps the best thing Trump said in the victory speech last night, apart from thanking the American people and declaring a time to heal, was his pledge to govern. Promises made, he said, will be promises kept.
Frankly, this was, I believe, the greatest political movement of all time. There's never been anything like this in this country, and maybe beyond. And now it's going to reach a new level of importance because we're going to help our country heal. We're going to help our country heal. I will govern by a simple motto: Promises made, promises kept. We're going to keep our promises.
Now, much of that will depend upon the capacity and judgment of those he appoints, those who will have to convert the promises into programs, and on whether he can keep from making as many needless enemies as perhaps last time. But there's no reason to think that he won't cut taxes and red tape, as he did last time, and unleash the massive creativity of the American economy. The purists, well, they'll say his tax cuts are unfunded, and they'd be right. But an unfunded tax cut is much, much better than a similarly unfunded new government program, because at least they will add the tax cuts to the economic dynamism rather than just create more bureaucracy. Anthony Albanese, take note. There'll be the usual conniptions about destroying the planet once Trump again refuses to sign up to more emissions targets. But honestly, should anyone care if America's emissions go up a bit when China's, well, they're going up by one hell of a lot, especially if it means that power prices fall further and more jobs stay in America rather than migrate to the third world. Again, Australia, take note. Perhaps the biggest lesson from this revolt against the new Green left establishment is that people vote more as citizens than as subgroups. Kamala Harris's abortion pitch was supposed to lock in the women's vote. Some of the states that voted to support new pro-choice propositions, well, they still voted in force for Donald Trump. Underscoring the point you've heard me make here over and over again, and I see the polling and have in the past that heaps of other commentators that have never seen, women will not vote for a candidate based on gender alone. Forget that, those that tell you that. Forget it. We can split out all the issues like anyone can. We're just as concerned about defence and the economy as we might be about, say, childcare. It's an insult to women to assume otherwise, as the Harris camp did over and over again. And using then those celebrity boosters only amplified just how out of touch their candidate was. The Vice President's identity as the daughter of an Indian mother and a Jamaican father was supposed to lock in the black vote and the migrant vote. Well, it didn't. In fact, Trump did far better than expected with women, Latinos, blacks and union workers who all refused to be pigeonholed by identity politics. Maybe, just maybe, we can all hope here, Trump's victory is a sign that we just might have passed peak woke.
Like, everybody needs to be woke. And you can talk about if you're the wokest or woker, but just stay more woke than less woke.
Let's hope good riddance to her and good riddance to woke.